"You don't get to look at her," the bailiff said quietly. Miles Carrington didn't answer. He couldn't. His mouth was dry in a way that felt permanent, like fear had turned his tongue into paper. He sat at the defense table in a federal courtroom that smelled faintly of old wood and disinfectant. The kind of room where people learned, too late, that confidence wasn't a skill, it was just a costume. Across the aisle, Vivian Blackwood held a baby against her shoulder. The infant was wrapped in a soft gray blanket, the color of winter clouds. Vivian's hair was pinned back with deliberate simplicity, and her eyes were calm in a way that didn't look like peace. It looked like control. Miles watched her anyway. Not openly. Not like the man he used to be. Loud, entitled, always ready to perform. He watched her in the smallest movements. The way she adjusted the baby's blanket. The way her fingers rested lightly on the child's back. The way she didn't once glance toward him, as if he were already gone. The judge's voice cut through the quiet. "Mr. Carrington, you were found guilty of corporate espionage, attempted extortion, and conspiracy to commit financial fraud. The evidence presented, particularly the communications and the falsified documentation, shows premeditation." Miles flinched at the word premeditation, because it wasn't wrong. It was just not how he'd told the story in his head. In his version, he was a survivor. A man who did what he had to do. A man who deserved what he took because no one had ever handed him anything. But the courtroom didn't care about his internal narration. The judge looked down, eyes cool. "For these reasons, this court sentences you to 20 years in federal custody." 20. The number landed with a weight that made his ribs feel too small for his lungs. Behind him, someone inhaled sharply. His mother, maybe, or the attorney who'd stopped believing in miracles weeks ago. The courtroom murmured the way crowds murmur at the end of a tragedy, when they can't decide if they're shocked or simply relieved it's over. Miles turned his head again, helplessly, to Vivian. For the first time, she looked at him. Not with anger. Not with pity. With something worse. Recognition. As if she were seeing him clearly now, at last. Not as a husband. Not as a threat. Not even as a mistake. As a lesson. A woman seated near the witness stand, Ava Sterling, kept her eyes down. Ava's lipstick was perfect, but her hands trembled against her lap. She looked like someone who'd won a small battle and lost the entire war. On the evidence screen, frozen behind the judge's bench, was a single phrase stamped on the file that had sealed his fate. The Canary Vault. Miles swallowed and his throat burned. He had thought he'd stolen secrets. He had stolen bait. And Vivian had been waiting for him to take it. The judge struck the gavel. A dull crack. Final. The bailiff's hand closed around Miles's arm. "You have anything to say?" the bailiff asked. Not cruelly. Almost like a man offering a stranger one last chance to be human. Miles tried. He really did. But what could he say, when the world had finally met the person Vivian Blackwood had always been, and realized what he had thrown into a snowstorm? Vivian shifted her baby slightly and whispered something into the child's hair. Too soft to hear. Miles didn't need to, because 3 years ago, on a Christmas night so cold it could slice skin, Vivian had looked at him with wet lashes and quiet hands and believed him, and he had believed she was nothing. To understand how a man like Miles Carrington ended up in chains, you have to go back, not to the beginning. This story doesn't begin there. It begins with a woman standing barefoot on marble, listening to helicopter blades tear the winter sky open, and realizing the only love she ever begged for was the only love she would never beg for again. 3 years earlier, Vivian wore a name like borrowed clothing. Vivian Reed. It wasn't fake in the way lies are fake. It was fake in the way disguises are, stitched carefully, meant to hold under light. She worked in a library on the Upper West Side where the heaters clicked too loudly and the carpet had permanent shadows from years of footsteps. She wore sweaters that were warm but plain. She carried tote bags that looked like anyone else's tote bag. No driver, no security detail, no Blackwood crest. If anyone asked where she was from, she said, "Upstate," and let the vagueness do the work. And when she shelved books in the early morning, before the city was fully awake, she sometimes let herself pretend this was her life. Not the life waiting behind glass and boardrooms, not the life built on iron and ocean routes and contracts that could shift entire economies, just a woman, a person, On the day she met Miles Carrington, it was raining in a way that made the city feel bruised. Vivian stood near the return counter, flipping through a stack of donations. Paperback romances, a cracked cookbook, a biography someone had underlined like it was scripture. A man entered the library with the energy of someone who didn't belong there. Too alert, too hungry. He shook rain from his coat like a dog shaking off water, then paused, scanning the space like he'd accidentally walked into a church. He had the kind of face that worked hard to look effortless. Dark hair, neatly styled. A jaw sharpened by intention more than genetics. He looked like he was used to being watched. His eyes landed on Vivian, and it was the smallest moment, barely a flicker, but Vivian felt it. The calculation. The instinct to categorize. She had seen it before in boardrooms and charity galas, in men who thought they were hiding their ambition. But in a library, under fluorescent lights, it looked almost out of place. He approached the counter, smiling like he'd practiced it. "Excuse me," he said. "I'm looking for something." Vivian kept her expression neutral. "We can try. What are you looking for?" He leaned closer, as if sharing a secret. "A book that explains how to become someone else." She raised an eyebrow. "Fiction or self-help?" He laughed. It was a warm laugh, convincing. The kind that tried to invite you into the joke. "Self-help, I guess," he said. "But I'm serious. I'm starting over, sort of." Vivian should have ended it there. Polite, professional. She should have gestured toward the shelves and moved on. But something in his tone caught her. Not the charm. The edge beneath it. The desperation wrapped in confidence. "What do you mean, starting over?" she asked, before she could stop herself. He hesitated just a beat. Then he straightened, like the decision had been made. "My name's Miles," he said. "Miles Carrington. I just moved here. I'm trying to build something." "Build what?" He smiled again, softer this time. Less show. More plea. "A life that isn't small." Vivian felt the words settle into her chest like a pebble dropped into water, because she knew what it was to inherit something enormous and still feel small. She gestured toward a side table. "We have coffee. It's not good coffee, but it's warm." Miles glanced at the coffee, then at her, and shrugged. "Warm is fine," he said. They sat at a table near the window, rain streaking the glass like running ink. Miles talked as if he'd been waiting for someone to ask. He grew up in a town that had more closed factories than open ones. He'd watched his mother count coins at the kitchen table. He'd learned early that being polite didn't get you fed. "So I decided," he said, stirring his coffee, "I'd never be powerless again." Vivian listened quietly, the way she'd learned to listen in meetings when men spoke too much. "And now?" she asked. "Now I'm in finance," he said. And there it was. Pride. Not gentle pride. Pride like a weapon. "Investments. I'm with Harbor Light Capital." The name meant little to Vivian personally, but she stored it away anyway, like a note slid into a drawer. Miles watched her reaction, searching for recognition. She gave him none. "Sounds intense," she said, simply. He blinked, thrown off. "Yeah," he said. "It is. But I'm good at it." Vivian smiled faintly. "Most people say that." He laughed again, but this time there was a flicker of irritation. Then he leaned back, recovering, charm returning like a tide. "What about you?" he asked. "You work here?" "I do," Vivian said. "That's kind of amazing," he said, and when she looked at him, confused, he shrugged.
People don't do things like this anymore. Books, quiet, it's real.
Vivian didn't answer. She wasn't sure if he meant it or if he was trying to say the right thing, but he kept coming back. At first it was small. He'd appear on Thursdays, rain or shine, asking for book recommendations he didn't actually need. He'd bring a pastry, then two, pretending he'd bought extra by accident. He learned the names of the older librarians. He helped a child reach a shelf. He carried boxes when deliveries arrived. It was effort. And Vivian, against her better judgment, felt something thaw. Not trust, exactly. Hope. On a night in late October, after the library closed, Miles waited outside with his hands in his pockets. The streetlights made his face half gold, half shadow. "Dinner," he said, like it was an order he'd decided she deserved. Vivian considered saying no. Then she pictured the Blackwood spire, its endless windows, its hollow luxury, the way people smiled too hard at her there, the way every conversation carried an invisible invoice. And she said yes. Vivian Blackwood had been trained to be untouchable. Her father used to say it like advice. "People can't betray what they can't reach," he'd told her once years ago, when she was 14 and crying because a girl at school had posted a photo of her mansion and called her a spoiled princess. Vivian had stared at him through tears. "I don't want to be untouchable," she'd whispered. Her father's gaze had been heavy with a sadness he never explained. "Then you'll get hurt," he said, "and the world won't apologize." She learned quickly that the Blackwood name opened doors and closed hearts. Every friend came with questions about yachts. Every boyfriend came with a timeline. Every compliment had hooks. When her father died, suddenly, brutally, a heart that refused to keep pace with the empire he built, the grief didn't happen quietly. It happened in front of cameras. It happened in board meetings. It happened while men twice her age tried to speak over her, hoping the young heiress would fold. Vivian didn't fold. She walked into the boardroom in a black dress and told them, in a voice that didn't shake, that Blackwood Minerals and Maritime would not be carved up while she was alive. They tested her. She buried them in numbers. She survived. And survival did what it always does. It hardened her. So when she met Miles with his rain-soaked coat and his hungry eyes, she did something she had never done before. She stepped outside her fortress. Not because she believed in fairy tales, because she wanted, once in her life, to be chosen without her name being the reason. She told herself it would be an experiment, a human one. She created rules. No revealing her identity, no using her resources, no Blackwood anywhere. If Miles loved her, he would love Vivian Reed. Plain, quiet, library hands, cheap sweaters. And if he didn't, she would know. Vivian wasn't naive enough to rely on hope alone, so she built a safety net. Not a dramatic one, not a spy movie one, a business one. It was called the Canary Vault. A canary trap, her counsel explained, worked by giving slightly different pieces of information to different people. When the information leaked, you knew exactly who leaked it. Vivian took that idea and made it personal. She created files that looked valuable. Deal memos, contract drafts, internal projections, all plausible, all tempting, all marked subtly in ways only her team could detect. Then she planted them in places where only one person at a time could reach them. Not to catch an enemy, to measure loyalty. Her head of security, Malcolm Hayes, had frowned when she explained it. "You're doing this for a man," he said, not disrespectful but concerned. Vivian's eyes had been distant, looking out at Manhattan like it was an ocean. "I'm doing it for myself," she corrected, "so I don't lie to myself." Malcolm didn't argue. He just said, "If he's worthy, he'll never even know it exists." Vivian nodded. and she went back to being Vivian Reed. She went on dates with Miles that felt like normal life: cheap Italian food, late-night walks, movies in small theaters where no one recognized her. Miles would talk about money like it was a god, but he would also touch her hand like it mattered. He would look at her like she was a doorway. Vivian didn't notice at first that he wasn't walking toward her. He was walking through her, toward a future he could smell but couldn't name. When he proposed, it wasn't extravagant. A ring, a dinner, a smile that looked real. "I want you," he said, voice low, intense. "I want us. I want a family." Vivian's throat tightened. Family. She had an empire, but she didn't have a family, so she said yes, and told herself that this time it would be different. Marriage, for Miles, was an upgrade. Vivian didn't see it like that at first. She saw it as a promise, a private world between two people. But Miles began to treat their life the way he treated his career, like a ladder. They moved out of Vivian's small apartment and into a house in Rye, Frostgate Manor, though Vivian never called it that. The name had come from Miles, from the real estate brochure, from the way he loved a label. "It's perfect," Miles said, walking through the high-ceilinged foyer as if he owned the concept of space. This is what we deserve." Vivian glanced at the marble floors and the chandelier that looked like frozen fire. "We could have stayed in the apartment," she said gently. Miles laughed like she'd told a joke. "Why would we?" he asked. "Why live small when you don't have to?" The first time Vivian noticed the change was at a dinner party. Miles's colleagues from Harbor Light sat around their dining table, drinking wine too expensive for the way they swallowed it. The conversation was sharp, competitive, full of names and deals. Vivian mostly listened. At some point, one of the men, Graham, smug and sunburned, asked Vivian, "So what do you do?" Vivian answered simply, "I work at a library." There was a pause, then laughter. Not cruel, exactly, but dismissive, like her sentence had dropped into the room like a feather. Miles laughed too. He placed his hand on Vivian's shoulder and squeezed, a little too hard, like he was anchoring her. "She's humble," he said proudly. "I pulled her out of nowhere, honestly." Vivian's smile froze. Later in the kitchen, she confronted him softly. "You didn't have to say it like that." Miles looked irritated, like she'd ruined something. "It's true," he said. "Why are you sensitive?" "I'm not sensitive," Vivian said, voice controlled. You just what?" Miles cut in. "You want them to think you're something you're not?" Vivian stared at him. "I am something," she whispered. Miles scoffed. "You're my wife. That's enough." It was the first time she felt the walls of their marriage tighten. The second time was when she got pregnant. At first, Miles was thrilled. He held her belly like it was proof of success. He announced it at parties, toasts, phone calls, like he'd personally invented the concept of legacy. But as Vivian grew, as her body became slower, softer, more vulnerable, Miles became impatient. He hated the quiet that pregnancy brought. He hated the way Vivian stopped drinking and started leaving parties early. He hated, most of all, that she didn't perform perfect wife anymore. "You're tired all the time," he complained one night, tossing his tie on the bed. "I'm making a person," Vivian said, too exhausted to sharpen her tone. Miles rolled his eyes. "My mom had 3 kids and still worked 2 jobs. Vivian's jaw clenched. "That's not a competition." Miles stared at her, and for a moment his face was almost unfamiliar. "Everything is a competition," he said. "That's the point." Then came Ava Sterling. Ava arrived like a spark in dry grass. She was younger, bright-eyed, always laughing. She wore dresses that looked expensive but not careful. She touched Miles's arm too often and looked at Vivian like Vivian was a piece of furniture. Ava was introduced at a Harbor Light fundraiser. Miles stood beside her as if she belonged there. "Ava's new to the team," Miles said. "She's brilliant." Ava smiled at Vivian. Your husband's been so helpful, she said, voice sweet. I don't know what I'd do without him. Vivian smiled back, polite. Inside, something cold moved. Afterward, in the car, Vivian said, She flirts with you. Miles laughed, loud and delighted. You're jealous, he said. That's cute. I'm not jealous, Vivian said quietly. I'm noticing. Miles's smile faded. You notice too much, he snapped. Stop being paranoid. Vivian turned her face toward the window. Streetlights streaked across the glass like a pulse. She told herself it was stress, pregnancy, Miles's workload. But the truth was simpler. Miles liked being worshipped, and Vivian, tired and swollen and honest, wasn't worshiping. So Miles found someone who would. By the time Vivian was 8 months pregnant, the house felt like it belonged to Miles alone. His suits filled the closet. His taste replaced hers. His friends came over without asking. His music played too loudly. Vivian moved through rooms like a guest. And still, she tried. She cooked. She organized. She smiled. Because somewhere inside her was that girl who had begged her father not to make her untouchable. She didn't want to win. She wanted to be loved. Then Christmas came, and Miles decided to teach her a lesson. Christmas at Frostgate Manor was never about warmth. It was about display. The house glowed from the outside, every window lit, every wreath perfectly placed, every garland arranged like a magazine spread. Inside, the air smelled of pine and expensive candles. The floors shined. The music was soft but insistent, like it was trying to cover the sharpness in the room. Vivian stood near the fireplace in a dark green maternity dress that made her look like a forest at night. Her belly was round and heavy under the fabric. Her feet ached. Her back ached. Her patience ached. But she held herself with practiced grace. Miles moved through the crowd like a king enjoying his court. He had invited everyone, Harbor Light colleagues, neighbors with old money, people he wanted to impress, and Ava Sterling, wearing a red dress that looked like it had been designed to spill wine on purpose. Ava hovered close to Miles all night, laughing too loudly at his jokes, pressing her body toward him when she spoke. Vivian watched, not with rage, with a quiet, growing certainty. At some point, Miles clinked his glass. Everyone, he announced. I have a gift. People turned, curious. Phones lifted for photos. Vivian's heart tightened. Miles walked to the Christmas tree. Under it sat a long, flat box wrapped in gold paper, tied with a velvet ribbon. He picked it up and turned toward Vivian. His smile was too wide. This is for you, he said. Vivian stepped forward, hands trembling slightly as she accepted it. She tried to smile, to pretend she didn't feel the room watching her. Thank you, she said. Miles's eyes glittered. Open it, he urged. Vivian untied the ribbon. Her fingers felt clumsy. She lifted the lid. Inside was a stack of papers. At first, she didn't understand. Then she saw the words at the top. Petition for dissolution of marriage. The room seemed to tilt. Someone laughed, an awkward, disbelieving sound. Vivian looked up, her face pale. Miles, she whispered. Miles took a sip of his drink, savoring. I figured, he said casually, since we're doing gifts, honesty is the best one. Vivian's throat tightened so hard it hurt. In front of everyone, she managed. Miles shrugged. Miles, why not? They're my friends, and you're... He glanced at her belly as if it annoyed him. You're not exactly subtle. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. Others watched with fascination like they were seeing a show they hadn't paid enough for. Ava's smile was small and satisfied. Vivian's hands shook around the papers. You're divorcing me, she said, as if saying it out loud might make it less real. Miles nodded, almost bored. You were fun, he said. At first, but you've become a burden. Vivian's eyes filled. She blinked hard. I'm carrying your child. Miles waved a hand. Yeah, and we'll handle that. But I'm done pretending you're anything other than what you are. Vivian stared at him.
What am I?
She asked, voice barely audible. Miles leaned closer, so only she could hear, but the microphone of the room, the attention, made it public anyway. You're a nobody, he whispered. A poor little library girl I rescued. And you forgot to be grateful. Vivian's lips parted. Her lungs forgot what air was. Then Miles stepped back and raised his voice again. So, he said, loud and bright. Here's how it's going to go. You sign, you leave. Tonight. Gasps. A few murmurs. Vivian's head turned slightly, seeking any sign of humanity in the faces around her. Most people looked away. One woman near the staircase frowned, conflicted, but didn't move. No one wanted to challenge Miles in his own house. No one wanted to be caught on the wrong side of money. Vivian swallowed, tasting salt. Miles, she said, voice shaking now. It's Christmas. Miles smiled coldly. Exactly, he said. Fresh start. Ava stepped closer, slipping her arm around Miles's like it belonged there. Vivian's stomach turned. And then, the final humiliation. Miles snapped his fingers. 2 staff members appeared, uncertain. Her bags, Miles said. Pack them, and get her out. Vivian's hands went to her belly instinctively, protective. You can't, she whispered. Miles's eyes hardened. Watch me. The room blurred. Vivian didn't scream. She didn't slap him. She didn't throw the papers into the fire like a movie heroine. She did something quieter. She nodded, a small nod, like a door closing. Okay, she said. Miles blinked, thrown by how easily she surrendered. Vivian turned and walked toward the foyer. Behind her, Ava's laugh tinkled like broken glass. Outside, the snow hit her face like needles. The wind screamed across the estate. Temperatures had dropped below freezing. The world was white and merciless. Vivian stepped onto the front steps, the cold seeping through her shoes immediately. Her breath came in shallow bursts. She kept walking, down the long driveway, past the hedges sculpted into perfection, past the lights that tried to make the night look festive. Behind her, the house glowed with warmth that wasn't for her. She made it to the edge of the lawn before her legs trembled. The baby kicked. Vivian pressed a hand to her belly, tears freezing on her lashes. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stay. And then, a sound, low at first, distant, a vibration in the air. Vivian stopped. The sound grew louder, violent, chopping the night into pieces. Helicopter blades. She turned slowly, snow whipping around her like a storm trying to erase the world. A black helicopter descended from the clouds, sleek and brutal, lights cutting through the blizzard. It hovered over the front lawn of Frostgate Manor, pushing snow outward in a white explosion. The party inside must have paused. The music, the laughter. The helicopter landed with a heavy finality. The door slid open. Men in dark coats stepped out, moving with the efficiency of trained security. One of them held an umbrella like the weather had any right to matter. A tall man approached Vivian, his face stern but respectful. He stopped a few feet away. Then he bowed his head. Ms. Blackwood, he said, voice steady even against the wind. We're here to bring you home. Vivian's chest tightened. The name hung in the air like a gunshot. Behind her, the front doors of the manor flew open. Miles stepped out, drunk on confusion and anger. Guests spilled behind him, wide-eyed. Ava's face was pale. Miles stared at Vivian, then at the helicopter, then back at Vivian as if his brain couldn't make the pieces fit. What is this? He shouted over the wind. Vivian, what the hell is this? Vivian turned slightly, snow clinging to her hair. Her face was calm now, washed clean by cold. She looked at Miles, And for the first time in their marriage, she didn't try to make him comfortable. She didn't soften her words. She didn't beg. She simply said, "You wanted a fresh start." Miles's eyes narrowed. "What?" The tall man beside her stepped forward, voice carrying. "This aircraft is registered to Blackwood Minerals and Maritime," he announced, as if to the entire stunned crowd. "We are retrieving our principal." A murmur rippled through the guests. Blackwood. The name landed differently than Reed. It wasn't a name you gossiped about. It was a name you obeyed. Miles's face drained of color. "Blackwood?" he repeated, as if tasting poison. No." Vivian watched him, the way you watch someone realize the floor beneath them was never solid.
"Yes," she said quietly. "That's me."
Ava made a small sound, like a whimper. Miles's voice cracked, anger trying to cover fear. "You lied to me." Vivian's eyes didn't blink. "I hid," she corrected. "Because I wanted to know who you were when you thought I was nothing." Miles took a step forward as if to grab her. Security moved immediately, subtle but absolute, blocking him. Miles froze. He had never been blocked in his own house before. Vivian turned toward the helicopter. As she walked, the wind wrapped around her dress, the snow swirling like smoke. At the door, she paused and looked back one last time. Miles stood on the steps of Frostgate Manor, surrounded by people who suddenly didn't want to stand too close to him. His mouth opened, searching for words. Vivian said the simplest sentence in the world. "Merry Christmas, Miles." Then she stepped into the helicopter. The door closed. The blades roared again, and the world became white. As the helicopter lifted into the storm, the lights of Frostgate Manor shrank below like a toy. And Vivian Blackwood, heiress, CEO, woman with a child inside her, closed her eyes and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not sadness, not even anger. Clarity. The Blackwood spire rose over Manhattan like a verdict. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. Its glass reflected the city's lights with the cold confidence of something that would outlive everyone beneath it. Vivian entered through a private lobby that smelled of polished stone and clean air. Her heels clicked softly, steady, even though her body ached. A team met her. Malcolm Hayes, head of security, Elise Ward, general counsel, Jonah Park, CFO, and a doctor who checked her vitals before she was allowed to go upstairs. No one asked if she was okay. They asked what she needed. Because in the Blackwood world, emotions were private. Action was language. In the elevator, Malcolm glanced at Vivian's face. "You're bleeding cold," he said quietly. Vivian's lips moved in a faint half-smile. "I'm not bleeding," she said. "I'm done." Elise held a tablet, eyes sharp. "Do you want to proceed?" Elise asked. Vivian looked at her. "Do you remember the file set from 3 years ago?" Vivian asked. Elise's brow lifted. "The Canary Vault." Vivian nodded. Elise didn't smile, but something like approval flickered. "You were right to prepare," she said. Vivian's gaze lifted to the changing numbers of the elevator display. "I didn't prepare to destroy him," Vivian said. "I prepared to survive him." The elevator opened to a suite that didn't feel like a home. It felt like a command center dressed in luxury. Vivian walked to the windows and looked down at the city. Somewhere in Rye, Miles was probably still standing in his doorway, trying to understand what he'd just witnessed. He had thrown her out like trash. Now he was about to learn what it meant to throw away a Blackwood. Vivian turned back. "Operation Nemesis," she said. The room went still. Jonah Park exhaled slowly. "Understood." Elise tapped her tablet. "We'll initiate the sequence." Malcolm's voice was low. "Do you want him monitored?" Vivian's eyes were empty of softness. "Not monitored," she said. "Contained." Elise's fingers moved quickly. "Phase 1, Elise said. Financial containment." Phase 1, Crown Bridge Bank. At 7:12 a.m., The next morning, Miles Carrington walked into a cafe near Harbor Light Capital with his usual arrogance. He ordered without looking at the barista. He checked his phone while she made his drink. When he tapped his card to pay, the machine beeped and flashed red. Declined. Miles frowned. "Try again," he said. The barista did. Declined. Miles laughed sharply. "That's impossible." The barista shrugged, already annoyed. "You can pay another way," she said. Miles pulled out another card. Declined. His smile vanished. He opened his banking app. A loading circle spun, then an error message. He tried again. This time the app opened, but every account was frozen. He felt a pulse of panic. He called the bank immediately. A cheerful automated voice informed him his call was important. After 4 minutes of waiting, a representative answered. "Crownbridge Bank, how can I help you?" "This is Miles Carrington," he snapped. "All my accounts are locked. Fix it." There was a pause. Typing. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carrington," the representative said carefully. "Your accounts have been placed under review." "Review by who?" Miles barked. "I have bills, I have—" "Review by the compliance division," she said. "It's mandated." "Mandated?" Miles's hand tightened around the phone. "By what?" Another pause, longer this time. "By Blackwood oversight," the representative said quietly. Miles froze. "What did you just say?" "I'm sorry," she repeated, voice strained. "I can't provide further details. You'll need to contact your attorney." Miles's heart pounded so hard it made his vision blur. Blackwood. The name again. He slammed the call off. In the cafe, people stared. Someone whispered. Miles forced himself to breathe. This was a glitch, a misunderstanding, something he could fix. He was Miles Carrington. He fixed things. He marched into Harbor Light Capital like he was walking into a battlefield he knew. The receptionist looked up and hesitated. "Miles," she said softly. "They're waiting for you." "Who?" he demanded. She didn't answer. She just pointed. The conference room doors were closed. 2 security guards stood outside. Miles's stomach dropped. He pushed the doors open. Inside sat men and women he didn't recognize. They wore suits like armor, faces unreadable. At the head of the table sat a man Miles had seen only in news articles, Jonah Park, Blackwood's CFO. Miles's mouth went dry again. Jonah looked up. "Mr. Carrington," Jonah said, as if greeting a stranger at a hotel. "Please sit." Miles didn't sit. "What the hell is this?" he snapped. "What are you doing here?" Jonah folded his hands. "Harbor Light Capital has been acquired," Jonah said. "Effective this morning." Miles laughed, wild and disbelieving. "Acquired by who?" Jonah's eyes didn't blink. "Blackwood Minerals and Maritime." Silence. Miles's lungs refused to work for a second. "That's impossible," Miles said, voice cracking. "We're not for sale." Jonah slid a folder across the table. "You were," Jonah said simply. "You just didn't know it yet." Miles grabbed the folder, flipping pages with shaking hands. Contracts, signatures, legal language that looked like a cage. His head spun. "You can't," he began. Jonah held up a hand. "Mr. Carrington," he said, calm. "You are being terminated." Miles stared, stunned. "For what?" he hissed. "I've made this firm millions." Jonah nodded, almost sympathetic. "Yes," he said. "And you also committed internal fraud." Miles's face twisted. "Fraud," he spat. "That's—" Elise Ward stepped forward from the back of the room, her voice precise. "Unauthorized trades," she said. "Misrepresented asset valuations, misuse of confidential client information. We have documentation." Miles's mind raced. Those trades. He'd covered them. He'd disguised them. A cold realization hit him. They weren't accusing him to negotiate. They were accusing him to destroy him. Miles's eyes flicked around the room. "Vivian," he whispered, the name tasting wrong. "She's doing this." Jonah didn't deny it. Jonah simply said, "Security will escort you out." Miles's fists clenched. "This is a vendetta," he snarled. "This is—" Elise's eyes were cold. "This is accountability," she corrected. The guards stepped forward. Miles tried to stand tall as they walked him out, but the hallway felt narrower than it had ever been. Employees watched from their desks, shocked and curious. Someone lifted a phone to record. Miles realized with a sick jolt that he was becoming content. He was becoming entertainment. And that was only phase 1. Phase 2, the house and the car. He drove home in his Ferrari because it was the only thing that still responded to him. The engine roared, but the sound didn't comfort him. It sounded like denial. When he pulled into the driveway of Frostgate Manor, a black SUV sat near the entrance. 2 men stood beside it, holding clipboards. Miles slammed the car door. "What are you doing here?" he barked. One of the men looked up, expression neutral. "Mr. Carrington," he said, "we're here regarding your mortgage." Miles scoffed. "I pay my mortgage." The man tapped his clipboard. "Your mortgage terms include a morality and fraud clause," he said. "You violated it." Miles's stomach dropped. "That's not a thing," he snapped. "It is," the man said and handed him papers. "Foreclosure proceedings have been accelerated. You have 48 hours to vacate." Miles's vision went white at the edges. "This is my house," he hissed. The man didn't flinch. "It's the bank's house," he corrected. "Crownbridge Bank." Blackwood. Again. Miles's breath came fast. He turned toward the mansion, toward the lights still glowing inside. Ava's red coat appeared in the doorway. She looked startled. "Miles?" she called. Miles stalked toward her. "Ava," he snapped. "Get inside. We need to talk." Ava hesitated. Behind her, Vivian's absence felt like a ghost. "Miles," Ava said carefully, "I saw the news." Miles froze. "What news?" Ava held up her phone. On the screen was a video. Miles recognized it instantly. Him, standing beside the tree, smiling as he handed Vivian the divorce papers. Vivian's pale face, her pregnant belly, the hush of the room. A close-up of Miles's mouth as he hissed, "You're a nobody, a poor little library girl I rescued." The video had captions. The captions were brutal. "New money broker humiliates pregnant wife on Christmas." Who is she really? Blackwood heiress exposes husband. Miles's throat tightened. "How?" he began. Ava looked away. "It's everywhere," she said. "People are disgusted." Miles's hands shook. "It's edited," he snapped. "It's—" But even as he said it, he knew the truth. It wasn't edited. It was him. He looked at Ava. "Did you—" he started. Ava's eyes widened, offended. "No," she said quickly. "But, I mean, someone did." Miles's mind raced. Someone at the party. Someone who'd seen the helicopter land and realized what story they could sell. Miles turned away, swallowing bile. His phone buzzed. A message from his assistant at Harbor Light. "Your badge doesn't work anymore. They're wiping your access." Another buzz. From a luxury dealership. Vehicle repossession notice. Please contact... Miles stared at the screen. He backed toward his Ferrari as if it were a lifeboat. Ava called his name again. "Miles," she said, voice thin. "What's going to happen?" Miles turned on her, rage suddenly searching for a target. "You're going to shut up," he snarled. "You're going to stay with me. You're going to—" Ava flinched, and in that flinch, Miles saw it. Ava was not loyal. Ava was opportunistic. She had loved his power, not him, and his power was evaporating. The next 2 weeks were a slow execution. Miles's accounts stayed frozen. His credit lines vanished. His friends stopped returning calls. People who once laughed at his jokes now pretended not to recognize his number. He tried to borrow money. No one wanted to be associated with him. Harbor Light released a statement about ethical standards. The same men who had toasted with him last month now spoke about company values, faces solemn, eyes calculating. Ava moved out of Frostgate Manor before the 48 hours were up. She left a note. It said, "I can't do this." Miles crushed it in his fist. He tried to hold on to control by insisting this was temporary. He told himself he could pivot, rebuild, sue. But every door he tried to open had Blackwood's fingerprint on it. He hired a lawyer. The lawyer asked for a retainer. Miles couldn't pay. The lawyer stopped answering calls. Miles watched himself become smaller in the city. He slept in cheap hotels until they refused his card. Then he slept in places he never thought he'd sleep. The back seat of a rental car until the rental company flagged him. A friend's couch until the friend's wife felt uncomfortable. Finally, a bench in a private building lobby until security asked him to leave. The viral video followed him like a shadow. People recognized him in coffee shops. They whispered. They filmed. They posted. Miles, who had once loved being seen, learned what it meant to be seen without admiration. One night, he stood outside the Blackwood spire, staring up at the tower's lights. Each window was a star he couldn't reach. He called Vivian. It went to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. He called a third time. Voicemail. He left a message, voice trembling with anger and desperation.
You think you can ruin me?
He hissed.
You think you can just erase me?
The next morning, Elise Ward listened to the voicemail with a neutral face and deleted it. Vivian never heard it, because Vivian was busy doing something Miles couldn't understand. She was building a new life. Inside the Blackwood spire, Vivian sat in a nursery that smelled faintly of fresh paint and clean linen. A nurse adjusted pillows behind her back. A doctor checked her blood pressure again. Vivian stared at the city outside. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't celebrating. She was grieving. Not for Miles, for herself. For the part of her that had wanted to be ordinary. Malcolm stood near the door. "Elise wants to confirm," he said. "If he escalates, we can proceed with the final phase." Vivian didn't look away from the window.
He will escalate,
she said calmly. Malcolm's voice softened. "You're sure?" Vivian finally turned her head. Her eyes were tired, but sharp.
He doesn't know how to lose,
she said.
He only knows how to take.
She placed a hand on her belly.
And if he thinks he can take from me again, she whispered, he's going to learn what it costs.
Miles escalated exactly the way Vivian predicted. When the world stopped responding to his charm, he reached for something darker. He had remembered something. 3 years ago, early in their marriage, Vivian had been careful about her work. She never spoke about deals, never left documents in plain sight, except once. Miles remembered a night when she'd been distracted, leaning over the kitchen counter with her laptop open. She'd stepped away to take a call. On the screen had been a folder labeled something like Maritime Expansion. Miles had told himself he didn't care. But he had looked. Just a glance. Just enough to know that Vivian's ordinary life wasn't so ordinary after all. Back then, he hadn't understood what he was seeing. Now, desperate, he dug through old hard drives and cloud backups. He broke into shared accounts he'd once had access to. He tried passwords. He tried anniversaries. Finally, he found it. A folder buried in a forgotten archive. Canary. Miles's breath caught. Inside were files, dozens of them. Contracts, projections, emails. It looked like treasure. It looked like leverage. Miles laughed. The sound cracked and ugly in the small rented room he'd been squatting in.
I knew it, he whispered. I knew you weren't just a librarian.
He printed copies at a cheap print shop, hands shaking. He stuffed them into a folder like a man carrying his last weapon. Then he reached out, not to Vivian directly, to the press. He chose a reporter known for scandal. He sent a message. I have documents proving Blackwood wrongdoing. I'll sell them. Or I'll go public. The reporter replied within an hour. Meet me. Miles felt power return to his veins like a drug. He arrived at the meeting in a wrinkled coat, trying to look casual. The reporter, a woman with cold eyes and a sharp pen, sat in a booth and barely looked up. You have proof? She asked. Miles slid the folder onto the table. I have enough to make her beg, he said. The reporter opened it, scanned the top pages. Her expression didn't change. Miles frowned. What? He demanded. The reporter closed the folder calmly. These are fake, she said. Miles's stomach lurched. They're not, he snapped. They're from her system. The reporter's eyes lifted. You don't understand, she said. They're not fake, like forged. They're fake, like designed. Miles stared, confused. What are you talking about? The reporter leaned closer, voice low. Blackwood runs canary traps, she said. This is well known in certain circles. Different versions of sensitive docs distributed to detect leaks. Miles's face went cold. What does that mean? The reporter's smile was thin. It means if you have these, she said, she knows you took them. Miles's heart hammered. He stood abruptly. This is, he began. The reporter held up her phone. I already forwarded your message to my editor, she said. We're not publishing, but I have to protect myself, so I'm also forwarding it to legal counsel. Miles's skin went numb. You can't, he whispered. The reporter shrugged. I can, she said, and I will. Miles stumbled out of the diner like a man walking out of a burning building. His mind screamed. He had been played. Not recently, not since the divorce, since the beginning. He barely made it 2 blocks before black SUVs rolled up beside him. Men stepped out. Not police, security. But behind them, flashing lights appeared, red and blue. An agent approached, badge visible. Mr. Carrington, the agent said, you're under arrest. Miles's mouth opened. For once, no words came. As the cuffs clicked around his wrists, he looked up at the winter sky. Snow drifted down, soft and indifferent. And in the distance, faint but unmistakable, he heard helicopter blades. Not arriving for him, never for him, only ever for her. The trial didn't feel dramatic in the way Miles imagined trials. There were no last-minute confessions, no surprise witnesses bursting in with redemption. There was paperwork, evidence, cold facts. Vivian attended most days, not because she enjoyed it, but because she refused to let anyone else carry the weight of her choices. She sat behind her legal team, calm, composed, her belly now gone, her baby born weeks earlier. Her daughter's name was Wren, a small bird, a quiet song. Vivian had chosen the name on purpose, because she was done naming things after storms. Miles sat at the defense table, thinner now, his arrogance replaced with a restless desperation. When the prosecution played the Christmas video, Miles stared at the screen like he was watching a stranger commit a crime. He could hear his own voice saying, "You're a nobody." He could see Vivian's face, the way her eyes had widened, the way her hands had trembled around the divorce papers. He remembered the feeling then, powerful. Now he felt only nausea. Ava Sterling took the stand. She wore a conservative suit, hair pulled back, trying to look like a woman who had made mistakes, but learned. Her voice shook when she spoke, but she didn't lie. "He told me," Ava said, eyes down, "that she was nothing, that she needed him. I believed him. Or I wanted to." The prosecutor asked, "Why did you cooperate with the investigation?" Ava swallowed.
Because I realized, she whispered, I was next.
Miles's lawyer tried to paint Vivian as vindictive, a woman who used her family's power to ruin a man. The lawyer spoke about revenge, about imbalance, about cruelty. Vivian listened without reaction. Then, on the day Vivian testified, the courtroom went silent in a different way. Not because she was loud, because she didn't have to be. She took the stand with measured steps, her posture straight. The prosecutor asked gently, Ms. Blackwood, why did you use a canary trap? Vivian's eyes moved briefly to Miles. He looked at her with a mixture of hatred and pleading. Vivian looked away.
I didn't build the canary vault for punishment, she said. I built it for truth. And what truth did you find?
Vivian's voice was steady.
That Miles Carrington didn't love me, she said. He loved what he thought I could become for him.
Miles's jaw tightened. The prosecutor asked, Did you instruct the bank to freeze his accounts? Vivian paused. It was the moment the defense had been waiting for, the moment to accuse her of abuse of power. Vivian answered carefully. I instructed Crownbridge to comply with its legal review procedures, she said. His accounts were frozen because of documented fraud and because he had access to sensitive corporate materials he was not authorized to possess. The prosecutor nodded. And the acquisition of Harbor Light Capital? That was a business decision that had been in negotiation for months, Vivian said simply. It was accelerated when we identified internal misconduct. The defense lawyer stood for cross-examination, voice sharp. Ms. Blackwood, he said, isn't it true you did all this because you were humiliated? Vivian looked at him.
I was humiliated, she said. But humiliation is not what drives Blackwood decisions.
The lawyer leaned forward. So what drives them? Vivian's gaze didn't waver.
Protection, she said. I protected my child. I protected my company.
And I protected myself from a man who thought throwing a pregnant woman into a snowstorm was a reasonable end to a marriage. A hush fell over the courtroom. Someone in the back row sniffled. Miles's lawyer opened his mouth, then closed it, as if he'd suddenly realized the story had already been decided in the public mind. Because that was the thing Miles never understood. Power wasn't just money. Power was narrative. And Miles's narrative had become poison. When the judge sentenced him, 20 years, Miles didn't cry. He didn't scream. He simply sat very still, as if his body was trying to become invisible. Vivian watched, not with joy, not with sadness, with the exhaustion of a woman who had carried two burdens at once, a child and a betrayal. After the trial, Vivian returned to Rye one last time. Not to Frostgate Manor. The house was already empty, the furniture sold, the chandeliers removed, the rooms stripped of the life Miles had tried to stage. Vivian stood outside on a gray day, Wren sleeping in her arms, Malcolm beside her. Snowflakes drifted lazily, soft, almost gentle. Nothing like the storm that had taken her away.
Are you sure?
Malcolm asked quietly. Vivian looked at the mansion, remembering the Christmas lights, the laughter, the papers in her hands.
It's just a building, she said.
Then she added softer,
but I don't want it to stand as a monument to him.
Within weeks, the mansion was demolished. Neighbors watched with a mix of shock and fascination. And then, in its place, something unexpected rose. Not another mansion, not a new symbol of wealth. A park, bright swings, a small playground, a walking path lined with young trees, a community garden, benches carved with simple words, Wren Park. On the day it opened, Vivian stood near the entrance with her daughter in a stroller, watching children run across the grass like they'd never known fear. The wind carried laughter. It also carried something else, faint but familiar. The distant thrum of helicopter blades far above, passing over the city like a memory. Vivian looked up briefly. Then she looked back down at Wren. Her daughter's eyes were wide and curious, taking in the world like it was new, like it could be good. Vivian leaned close and whispered,
"No one gets to decide your worth for you."
Ren blinked. A small hand reached up and grabbed Vivian's finger. Vivian felt tears prick her eyes. Quiet, private. Not grief, not anger. Release. She had wanted love that didn't ask for her name. She had found something else. A life that didn't ask for permission. And if the story leaves you with a strange ache, it's because it isn't just about revenge. It's about what happens when someone mistakes your softness for weakness and learns too late that softness can be a choice. And choice, real choice, is the deepest kind of power. If any part of Vivian's journey stayed with you, the quiet endurance, the moment she stopped begging to be treated kindly, leave a comment with the one line you'd want her to hear on that snowstorm night. And if you've ever had to rebuild yourself after being underestimated, you're not alone.